Rolling out with the break of dawn. Canvas skies and the show goes on. Iron stakes and the hammer sound. Building dreams on this muddy ground. With sawdust running through our veins, we do it for the faces in the crowd. Step right up with R&B, 'cause this ain't just a show, it's circus history.
All right, howdy everyone, and welcome to Off the Rail Podcast, your podcast for everything circus. We're your Off the Rail ringmasters. I'm R. This is B. How you
Doing
doing,
pretty good.
B?
How are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. And today's guest, we have world champion, a Hall of Famer. Uh, Her name is Shenea Stiletto. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Thank you so
How,
much.
how are you doing? And welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. I love that intro song. It's awesome. Thanks for
Awesome.
having
Thank you.
me.
Thank you. And as usual, our first question to every guest is plain and simple. What got you to run away with the circus?
Oh my gosh. Ooh, that's a great question. And so many things got me to run away with the circus. I was super inspired, I think, initially by going to a ton of shows when I was little. And I have an acrobatic gymnastics background. And I first saw performers and I thought, wow, that's like really incredible. It just seemed kind of otherworldly. And various mentors told me that that could be me one day. That really, I
Uh,
think, is where yeah, I got bit by the circus bug, and it's been in me ever since. And I've been happy to have this part of my life, and yeah, and to, I think, inform kind of every aspect of my lifestyle, as I like to call it. Yeah, and Cirque du Soleil started scouting me from when I was very young in circus, and I had a coach that wanted to make sure that I stayed and I competed as long as I possibly could. And I'm really grateful for that, because I could have started even younger, which, would have been also, to, I think, an incredible life. But I'm glad that I had a little bit more skin in the game, and, kind of got, myself about me so I could be as professional as possible before I, came into this world that we all know is so
Oh
different.
yeah.
and and takes so many different things, out of you. And it's a really interesting world. So I came, I think, as grounded as I could be into, I think, sometimes a very ungrounded industry. And that's also something that I think creates the really interesting people that make up this industry too. So, I was really fortunate of, kind of like my mentorship that got me into the circus, and meeting so many circus people when I was really young, from so many different backgrounds, from so many different facets of circus prior to, running away with it. And that also, too, I think, was very encouraging for me, in seeing folks that were like me, coming from my background, but then seeing, all of the other people that came from so many other diverse backgrounds, and how they made their life in this industry. And yeah, they were so good to me. And I think that that really informed why I made this choice too, besides, how I felt in terms of what could it be like performing on on a big stage like that, and being around so many interesting and talented and fascinating people. So
What was
I know.
what was your
yeah.
what was your feeling the first day of tryouts with Circus Soleil? Was it anything like when you won the world championship in 2002? Like nervous?
Well, yeah, nervous. No, well, again, I had a very interesting road. I did not audition for Cirque du Soleil. I was offered a contract
Oh,
without any auditioning. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, I started getting offered contracts when I was about 13, 14. So that's when Cirque started scouting me. And I could have, joined a few years into that. And that was when I was on the world scene, and was starting to win titles before my last one. Kind of like in the early in 2000. So yeah, it was a very familiar space for me. So I got to learn who the scouts were. And, I grew up with a lot of the folks that you see that are in Cirque and casting now. They were a part of my environment when I was still competing. So before even they were working for Cirque du Soleil in the capacity that many of them are now today, they were participating in sport in other ways too, while also too, participating in circus and in the cirque world. So it was a really interesting thing to, know people and to have that type of guidance and be familiar with them. And then, straight out of competition, go into the show world. I also started performing while I was still competing. So that was a great way, I think, to get my feet wet, where I wasn't
Oh, yeah.
completely immersed in the circus industry, but I was already actively a performer prior to winning my last world championships and going on my last Olympic tour. So it was really awesome. It was awesome the way that I was able to have, I think, those relationships built with folks that were in the industry. And then I didn't have that. I didn't have that experience, and so walking, kind of like friends through their experiences or things after that, and kind of having a reverse experience where then I ended up auditioning for things like much later than that, because then that did happen eventually. And so that was an interesting road of like, I already have a career, I'm already doing work, and then bouncing in and out of auditions for for other companies was also a different experience, and I think like a learning curve when you've already got the job.
So, what was your
Right
first
on.
act in Circus Soleil?
My first act that I did in Cirque du Soleil was a acrobatic hand to hand, and that was with my one of my acrobatic partners, but he was my last acrobatic partner, and I would say like my most prolific one, even though all of them were relevant and so important, and I had incredible milestones with all of those partners. But it was with my partner Arthur Davis, and we did an acrobatic hand to hand. It was a very dynamic act, and it was with lots of dynamic and static movement. And so, we essentially went from, performing competitively and then, evolving into becoming artists and starting off that way. I also started off in banking. So I also started off in doing a lot of like group acrobatics too, which was awesome. So those were my out of the gate specialties. And then I transitioned into doing solo work, solo hand balancing work after that too. But yeah, that was my entry into Cirque, and that was those were my first loves, especially doing a lot of, I would say, high level flipping, which is not something that you see me doing a lot now. So people see me now as mostly like more of like a static kind of like solo hand balancer. But my specialty for a very long time was flipping and doing all the triple flips and the double backs and things like that, and being in those big group numbers with five or six or seven different bases or porters. But I did, work with my partner Arthur Davis for about 10 years, between competing and then being in circus. And yeah, just bopping around to all the places and all the spaces.
Well, so what does it mean to you to be inducted into the U.S. Gymnastics Hall of Fame?
Oh, that was very special. It was very special. And being inducted for my gymnastics career, and then also too for my circus career, I think a few years later after that, they were both very special. Coming out of my acrobatic gymnastics career, I did so many things that were firsts, and it was an amazing time to have USA Gymnastics recognize that. acrobatic gymnastics. I was the
Yeah.
first ever world champion in acrobatic gymnastics.
Wow.
From America, and it had never been done before. I was the first one to get any kind of medal at the World Games. I got silver
Oh,
prior to
wow.
becoming a world champion. Yeah, and then I was the first ever two-time world champion in the history of American acrobatic gymnastics too. So, and then we were the first ones given the honorary Olympian title two times. For winning back-to-back titles. So it was really special, and we really moved the needle, myself and my partner Arthur Davis, on so many things that they didn't give to acro. As we it's such a popular phrase to say now, and it's gotten so mainstream, and I'm really excited and happy about that. But a lot of those things came from me and my partner Arthur Davis, so we changed the game on how USA Gymnastics supported the discipline, and the spaces that we went into, and we opened a lot of doors um, for competitors for years after that, in being taken seriously as American acrobats and putting us on the map in that way. So I'm really grateful for we were the first ever acrobats to be inducted into the USA Gymnastics Hall of Fame, and they didn't do that before. So there were so many things that they actually didn't do for acrobats prior
Sure.
to the accomplishments that we made. And we pushed for a lot of things. We pushed for acrobats to get paid on the Olympic tour.
Wow.
So we were like, we're not only going to
No
participate
kidding.
on this
Wow.
Olympic tour, we want to get paid just like all of our friends that are Olympians, because acro and acrobatic gymnastics is still a non-Olympic sport, which I have been advocating behind the scenes, and so like all over the place, pushing for that Olympic recognition. But we essentially said we're on the same level, and they listened to that, and so it changed so much in terms of our access within USA Gymnastics, and then in the sport internationally too, and making those connections, and showing the rest of the world, what American acrobats are made of. Just like showing
Sure.
the world what circus acrobats and circus performers are made of too. So it was a really it was very special to, I think, set the bar for our sport in that way, and then seeing how that has evolved, and how those doors continue to open. So it was really a culmination of a lot of work, and I was just really appreciative too of like my coach at that time. Getting his
Sure.
recognition for all the hard work that he put into us to make sure that we could be on that level, because it was so hard, and competing was so hard. And it's so hard to compete on that level,
Right.
and especially when you're in some ways not taken seriously yet. And so the politicking of competing is it's its own thing. And I think it meant so much to American acrobatics to have us be on that main stage and say, hey, like, we are like key players in this sport, and in this space, and we deserve to be here, and we also deserve to win.
So you've bridged
Oh,
you've
yeah.
bridged a lot between the acrobatic world, and do you feel that you've helped out in this acrobat circus scene like that with that huge?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And, obviously giving thanks to all of the acrobats, before me and my partner Arthur. But we were in a really interesting generation. We were the first generation on AGT. So me and my partner Arthur were the first acrobats
Oh, wow.
that were on AGT, that were the finalists on the very first season of AGT. So imagine how much has shifted after that. I mean, look at how many cycles and seasons they've had, and look
Oh,
at
my
what,
goodness.
AGT has become. So, now it's just like super common. Everybody expects there to be a ton of circus and a ton of acrobats on every single season. But at that first season, they didn't know. They didn't know what AGT was going to be. They didn't know how it was going to work, and we were on there, and they
Hmm.
were we were already working for Cirque and already doing all the things, and we kind of like played along with them as being kind of like new, or kind of coming out, or coming onto the scene and stuff like that, because they have like their storylines and stuff. But we were on there with Passing Zone. We were on there with so many incredible like circus acts at that time. And so it's I think we were a part of a really huge crossover of like mainstream circus in that way, while also too building on the fact that so many competitive acrobats are some of the most iconic performances in Cirque du Soleil too, and in circus, in Kidam, for example. I mean, there's so many references I can give that were people that were in sport and then did that amazing crossover and became, fantastic and phenomenal circus artists that inspired people like me to want to do circus and see that, I could have a life and career and see how far I could go. And yeah, and that was, I think, that kind of like a breaking point within circus. Again, for better or for worse, because we all have our feelings about AGT,
Right.
about like what they've become, and kind of like how they view circus. But I tell people too, like I really managed my time around all of the Got Talents, because I've been on Spain's Got Talent, Argentina's Got Talent,
Wow.
I've been on like 7 or 8 Got Talent since then, and
You were.
really, I think Germany's Got Talent. Yeah, I've been on so
Oh,
many.
wow.
So it's that led to, all of that. And like I said, now it's just kind of like a given. People expect that, they expect you to try and be on AGT or be on, any kind of like international show like that. But I think it's, a really important thing to remember the folks that were willing to put themselves out there, because all of us were professionals treated as amateurs in a way.
Right.
um and and I have, I have a lot of feelings and thoughts about what that model has kind of like turned into. But I just say, so many artists have given that show a lot, and they've given that brand a lot of
Yeah.
goodness. So Circus has given that brand a ton of
Talent.
credibility and
Yes.
talent. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
were on back in the Hasselhoff and Brandy and wow. Speaking of
Regis,
yeah, Reach. Oh my God, yeah, that's right. Regis was
Regis,
the host. Oh my goodness.
Regis. Yeah, I know. I was itty
Oh
bitty with
yeah.
all of them.
That means
Yeah. Oh
what's
yeah.
funny is that means I've seen you because I used to watch the show back then, so I have seen you. Holy cow, that's amazing.
That's when I used to watch the show too.
Yeah, wow.
Good joke.
With the what
Bad
so
joke.
with AGT, uh, what did the exposure from that teach you about the difference between performing for a live audience and performing on TV?
I think I mean I learned everything I needed to learn being on that one season. Everything. First off, they never got me they I never did a free appearance on any Got Talent series ever again.
Oh wow.
After I did the first season of AGT, which we did fight to get paid, by the way, but they were, at that point in time, and still, not offering that. But it taught me a lot about, having to protect yourself. I mean, the exposure was incredible. We were working at that time at SeaWorld. We were working, we were eventing, we were doing all sorts of stuff at that point in time. So the exposure at that time was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, we were just getting recognized all over the place, like, on the street, after every single performance, during a performance. It was awesome. It was really amazing, especially because we wanted circus to be highlighted. We wanted our sport to be highlighted at that point. We wanted it to feel like it had that mainstream appeal, and that's what they were kind of vying for. And then we also wanted everyone to see that performers can, like, get exposure in this way, and that it can turn into something. At least that's what we thought at the time. So it was great. I mean, it was very special, that first season. We got invited everywhere, onto like Good Morning America, the Today Show. We did all the different circuits. But I would have to say too, the other hard lesson that it taught us in that way, which again, we didn't necessarily need this exposure in that way because we were like professionals and we were already, kind of like in the thick of our career. But it did teach us about, harnessing exposure and how you can get that much exposure and not necessarily have like work opportunities pouring in. And you can give a lot of effort and energy into something like that too, and really have to be strategic after that in the way that you harness that type of appeal and that type of exposure, like as an artist. Like just because you get like a million people seeing you on TV doesn't mean that like you're going to start making like getting jobs like left and right.
Right.
Right, like it was based upon a lot of our connections that we already had been formulating, and people seeing us that had already known about us that were like inviting us into like different spaces and everything. But it was a really, I think, it was a very good lesson and a very hard lesson for us too. It also taught us about the politics of TV and, how things are like not as uncoordinated as you think that they are. And so we were like, wow, this is like competition. We thought this was more fair. And we were like, "Oh my god, it's like exactly the same." And and so that was like very eye-opening too, We always say that the person that won the show that year, it was this little girl, and she was an 8-year-old, I think, yodeler
Yeah.
on that first season. Yeah. And she signed her contract before they announced the winner that day on the live show.
Oh,
And
wow.
we got to see that and we got to know that. And then, having them asking us to pretend like we didn't know. They were like, everyone still has a chance. And we were like, but she already signed the contract and she already won the show. So like that was just hilarious. And if
Wow.
we weren't green even a little bit, at that point we were like, it was never gonna be that for us again.
How many
Gotcha.
circuses have you
Yeah.
performed with?
Oh, oh my. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. It's been, I've performed for so many circuses and it wasn't even the plan. I would have loved to have just stayed with one show and been there for like, 10 years. And that's just like not been my that's just not been my experience. I've bounced around a lot and I've worked with so many different shows and so many different circuses, and it wasn't necessarily always by choice. Like initially, my mentors and my coaches, they were like, you know what, they said, like, we don't want you to just like only do like one circus and like just like have your whole like everything, because they're like anything can happen, like what about if the show closes, or what about if you're maybe not happy. But it did lead me down a road where I've been able to work with a lot of circuses, a little bit and a lot. And that's been, I think, a really cool way of having a very well-rounded experience in this industry. Like I know people that maybe their only experiences have been Got Talents, and that's a really fascinating way to approach this sector. Or people that have only worked for Cirque du Soleil, and that's not also been my experience, even though I've worked with them a lot. Um, I've had a lot of interactions with Ringling and with Feld. I worked and I did the acrobatic choreography last year for Little Mermaid on
Oh, very
Ice,
nice.
Oh, wow.
and yeah, we confirmed the first artist in the show that didn't have to wear ice skates, which was a really big deal.
Oh,
And so that was, again, I've gotten experiences in working with different circuses in ways that I wouldn't have imagined. I would have imagined like, oh, I thought I would just be working for you as a hand balancer or as a hand. But in offering other things as I've grown, in this industry, I've been able to, do other things with my skill in terms of coordinate and train and choreograph and things like that too. So it's been a really, it's hard to put a number on it, and I try to not say how many years it's been because I'm like, I'm still, I started working for Cirque when I was 9.
Oh, okay. So
wow.
I guess I should ask this then. What was your favorite show, as in like themed, and that you just immersed and fell in love with? Because we all have our favorite shows.
Oh, Oh, yeah, I'd like to hear what both of your experiences were and what your favorites were because I have so many and oh, it's so hard to pick. I think one of the shows that I'm gonna pick just because it was something that my partner really wanted me to do. And I transitioned into being a solo hand balancer. And I didn't actually get to do this role, but I got offered this role. And it was the solo hand balancing role in Kidam by Cirque du Soleil. And oh, I was just so in love. And I never thought that I would be offered that role. I never thought that I would even be a solo artist that would be considered for the role. Honestly, I didn't. It was just like, I was just so enamored by it. And at that point, I thought like they were using a motor in those canes. And I was like, there's no way that anybody's turning by themselves on one arm. And that's just insane. I was really young when I saw it. And then I started learning, like that discipline. And I saw how hard it was. And then I, was thinking twice, like, do I really want to do this? This is a lot harder than I thought. I think I want to stay where I'm at. And so I did end up getting offered Kidam, but I had scheduling conflicts, like we all know
Oh yeah.
happens, where you get offered these phenomenal contracts, but you're already in a show and you're like, wow, I'm being offered the contract I've always wanted, but I just signed for a year somewhere else. And, sometimes I look back and I'm like, should I have stayed in that contract? Should I have tried to
Mm.
get out? Of that contract to go to the other one. But, I am very loyal. And, I couldn't have imagined like leaving one contract for another. But that then, because I didn't do Kidam, I ended up being offered the solo lead part for hand balancing in Verikai. And I, I loved Verikai by Cirque, and it was again one of my favorite roles, and I was so just. I was so happy to do it. I just was so in love with everything about that particular role and the dynamics and the character work. It was like a very long solo hand balancing performance. It was like, I think the ending act was like 9 or 10 minutes long, something like
Wow.
that. And it was definitely a journey in getting into that role. And I ended up getting into it because I was doing backup for someone who was taking parental leave. And it was yeah, it was kind of a dream for me. And I had some folks that were mentoring me that had told me over the years, you could do that role. Like you could eventually play that part. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe one day. And so that is like one of my favorite shows that I've done. But there are so many. I have so many favorites, and it's very hard to like just pick one of them because I've loved different shows for different reasons with so many different companies. And I did one show. I don't know if you both heard of it, but it was Cascabel in Chicago. Um, and it didn't run for very long. It was like a short term show. And as I'm even saying Cascabel, I also want to give a shout out to Zinzani because I love Teatro Zinzani, and I worked for Teatro Zinzani, and that was also one of my favorite contracts too that I've ever done. But Cascabel was a fabulous show. They centered the show around Rick Bayless, who won Top Chef, another reality TV show, which is hilarious. I can't believe I'm saying that, but he's phenomenal and he's amazing and he's quite something because he's like, such a prolific, chef and restaurant owner in
Oh yeah.
Chicago. And so they centered this entire show around him. And it was just great. It was like 2 months long. The cast was amazing. We ate on stage. He did the entire menu. We sang, we danced. Everything was live. The cast was tiny. It was just an all
I
around,
didn't.
just fabulous show. He was
I
fantastic
didn't know
too.
he did a circus show. I
Yeah, they did the whole show for him. They did it around him.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
It was great.
since you've been on so many shows and so many circuses, please tell me you have pie story or two.
Did I have what story?
A pie story? Being
A
pied or
pie
pieing
story.
somebody? Yeah.
We asked the good questions.
Yeah. You asked the most important ones. Yes, yes, I have. Yes, I
Yes.
have. I don't know. I'm trying to remember specifically which and where because I have.
Mm-mm.
100%. I know that I have given a pie.
Nice.
I know that I've done more than one pie. And if I'm remembering correctly, one or two of those happen in Germany.
Mm-mm.
And I wish that I could remember the specific details about those pieing stories. But if it comes back to me, I'll bring it back around in the episode.
No problem. Okay. So while you're thinking about that, how about the name, your stiletto? Is that the stage name?
Yes,
And
even
how
though
how did
now
you
I
come up with
can,
it?
yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can kind of use them like interchangeably now because I can like legally use Shanae Stiletto. But it is not my original legal name, but it is my stage name. And that's what I love about the circus. I love that we can just like create names and like create personas and everyone goes with it. Like I always tell people, there's some people I don't even know their real names because I only know their
Oh
stage
yeah.
name. I like only know their act name, I'm like, I only know them as Duo Desire.
Or Bella.
Like, yeah, Bella. I love Bella, by the way. I love Bella. Yeah, so Shanae Stiletto came about because I started doing solo hand balancing wearing stilettos and which is tricky to do at the beginning.
But
But it kind of stuck. And then I quickly, once I like started performing with stilettos on, I wanted to create a hand balancing prop that was unique and original. And I wanted to do it similar to the type of hand balancing that I really liked. And the type of hand balancing that I really like is very dynamic, where the hand balancing canes are constantly in motion and you're kind of dancing and moving around them. I love there's like a form of hand balancing that's very static where someone just kind of stays up there and they do like 30 positions like over and over and over again and they don't really have a lot of breaks, which is also brilliant and beautiful. But I also loved the presence of the kidam type of hand balancing and the varikai hand balancing, right? And those had moving canes and I love stiletto, so I was like, why don't I just build a giant stiletto that is a hand balancing
oh
prop
wow.
that rotates on a motor. So like give me the appeal that I'm looking for and that I think, you know, yeah, it's just really pretty, and it gave me kind of like that throwback to old circus, and that's also the kind of circus that I really really love. I love the rhinestones and the kind of like showgirl aspect to circus and performing, and cabaret and dinner theater, and I've done a ton of palazzo style like circus shows too. So I love the shows where you can kind of you go out in and out of creating like several different characters in one night, or you create an offshoot of a character and of kind of like who you are, and then establishing something new, and being very close up to the audience. So that is how I came to the Shanae Stiletto concept. I've had two iterations of it. So it went from like a black stiletto that's very sparkly, and now I have a newish version that's like red and sparkly. But I wanted it to be kind of like have like a showgirl aspect or burlesque aspect, and then like an old like generational circus family type performance appeal to it, because I love the throwback to where you just couldn't get enough of like the razzle dazzle.
Very nice.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's how I became, that's where the stiletto part came from, and it stuck. And I put out like a consensus: Are we going with this? And everybody said, yeah,
There you go. Right on.
yeah, yeah.
So you got involved in the White House with some historic art circus?
Ah, yes. Oh my, yes. The White House, which we have a nice little joke, which people may or may not laugh. We're like, and we don't think we're going to be invited back. I'm like, we haven't been invited back since. But it was a nice little ride. Yes, I formed the Circus Arts Guild of America to advocate for our circus industry and community here in America. And it took us all the way to the White House just last year. It's been a year now, but just last September, it culminated in an event at the White House, which was supposed to be a series. And unfortunately, due to the changeover in the administrations, our series got cut for the circus. TBD, who knows? Maybe they will invite us back and allow us to continue the series that we were supposed to be doing, which was essentially just inviting circus voices and perspectives from all over America, and also to international voices as well, and bringing them to the table with the other kind of players that affect the industry on a local, state, and federal level, that coordinate and affect our industry, and then having the minds of folks that have been in the industry for a long time, or from a lot of different backgrounds, not necessarily for a long time, but folks that have been very influential in this industry, and then discussing pathways to solutions for our industry in terms of policy and legislation, and gaining more rights. Circus arts is not recognized in America, and we think that that should change. And our push at the White House was to have that recognition. So it was phenomenal to have the recognition of the White House. We did that conversation
Sure.
with the Department of Labor, and it took a year of strategizing meetings with the White House, and then selling them on the concept, because first we were just offered to perform.
Oh,
And I was like, yeah, great, awesome. Thank you. We would love that, but we also have some other things that we would like to discuss with you. And if you wouldn't mind, we would like to speak more than we perform. And at one time, actually, we were going to have some performers there with the round table discussion. I was like, absolutely, if we can have some performers in here and, have that aspect to it, like maybe we'll combine it. But then eventually we just had it as the forum. Um, and so the forum, as I said before, was going to be an extension. We were going to be there every few months, actually, at the White House, and we were going to give so many different people a voice, and then ask, different unions to participate, like we did um, at the White House roundtable, because we don't have a union for the circus, and some, people would really like to see some aspect of the industry have union access, or union rights, or union coordination. So we, had them come, different unions that have represented circus over the years, in discussing what that pathway could look like, for shows all across America. And so, it was a really, I think, it was just really amazing. And it was a very hard road to get there, in discussing, what circus looks like through policy, and what have been the roadblocks to us having more access in government, and then also to having more circus people in the room. Because again, what so many of us have seen is, if you don't try to get in there and write things through your own visions and your own perspectives, other people will do it for you that don't really know the industry at all. And
Oh
so
yeah.
I wanted industry representation to be in the room with OSHA, and to be in the room with these big players that make all of these decisions with the National Endowment for the Arts. And we had support from so many of them, for the policies that we're continuing to try to leverage and get support for. So circus arts category recognition, which they have in Canada. So we asked Cirque du Soleil to support that, because they have those different rights in Canada. So we're like, wouldn't you love to see those same things in America? And wouldn't that be a beautiful thing for our industry? And different things that are happening in other parts of the world. We, in discussing and bringing up, the importance of Ringling, within the, arts and culture, and woven into the fabric of American history. Like that was a part of our conversation there. And then, we were hopeful to have more folks from all of the different sectors, be a part of this conversation. So we've continued that conversation beyond the White House. Obviously, things change, but you can still do the work, and doing that work, I think, is so instrumental. And I really wanted to do that work while I was still a performer, and giving the artists a voice. Which again, sometimes we're not always invited into the room. We are mostly the ones again that everyone's so excited to see and is so enamored by, but we're not usually the ones that get to be a part of those conversations. And so I wanted it to be artist led, but also to, the other demographics that make circus work. I wanted them all to be in the room too, because to me, that is the importance of like shaping our national conversation around our industry and our community and working together and driving forward a new narrative. So it was great to see an administration and to see a lot of people that were open to that. But it did take, a lot of time formulating what that vision was and what the solutions could be, within the laws as they exist now, and then trying to create new laws for all of us so that, our industry can be accounted for economically, so that we can be, kind of codified into law like we see in so many other countries. That are doing it, and we don't have to do it exactly the way they're doing it. We can do it the way that we can do it within our system. And so I think it's like looking at things in a new way, which in for some folks is maybe challenging in a way to do that, just because certain things have been the same for so long. But I think it's worthwhile to give ourselves the shot that, we were telling them, we're seeing you guys invite all these other industries into the White House. Like, what about us?
Yeah. And you still have the guild,
Like,
right?
yeah. Yes, I still have the Circus Arts Guild of America, and we are continuing to advocate on DC, on Capitol Hill, to legislators and lawmakers across America and on a state and local level, and pushing for policies and, trying to see what we can get shifted. Even in the pursuit of our policies, things can get changed without, certain things needing to be passed into law. We want to influence policies on all levels, and then also to continue to get ourselves into the room, because people ask me like, what did the White House meeting accomplish? And I said, it's getting us into a lot of rooms. And if you're not in the room, you're not a part of the conversation. And you need somebody either to bring you into that room, or you need some kind of seal or stamp of approval. That's why recognition would be so important. That's why if we got more labor rights, and got on the books in that way, it would be so important. It would help companies, it would help insurances, it would help so many things. It would help touring, it would help permits, all the things that, circus kind of struggles with, even now. But, we are, such a huge part of this economy. And so, by, utilizing these partnerships that we've tried to continue to make and relationships that we've continued to try to make, we're hoping that we can shift, a lot of these policies in our favor, or at least make sure that circus is accounted for properly within like the arts conversation, within the entertainment conversations, because we see so many times that like even in those conversations, like circus is just like specifically excluded. And when you bring that to the attention of folks in DC, and on like the state and local level, they're just like, wow, like we can't believe that circus is not included in that. Like you guys are just, you've just been like the most important thing for so many generations, and you are a true fine art, and you
Oh
should be
yeah.
respected in the way that the other fine arts are too. Yeah, and not being like left out of those spaces, and making sure that when they're gonna you know have a forum, or set a new agenda, that some of us are invited to that. And we're like not an afterthought, and we're not left off of the box that people are going to check off, that we don't have to be written in like we usually are, and that we get to take, I think, some advantage and recognition for all the hard work that circus has put into the American culture, the American economy, and all the the prevalence of circus now at this point too, where we are really a part of so many businesses economic agenda and gain. If they need something to do well now, they hire a circus performer, like full stop. Like that's that's who they come to when they need, their environment to be special or to be enhanced, or, to help them if they're not doing well. And so, we want to make sure that we all get benefit from that, instead of feeling like in some ways it's a little bit exploitive. It's like, how can we, be woven into things where we are able to harness a lot of that goodness that, we feel like we put into, a lot of different industries, not just like, the circus industry, which I think has done a phenomenal job in terms of evolving and staying relevant, and, bringing in so many other disciplines that, are able to collaborate with us and learn from us and take their industries to like new heights, whether it's in the arts world or it's in the sports world. Like, many things have been influenced by the work of circus and physical art forms and
Oh yeah,
performance.
people
So
can learn a lot from the performers because I've seen firsthand the dedication that people do just to go out for their 3 to 5 minutes. It's all day
yeah,
training.
we
Yeah.
know. We know how hard it is and how hard all of us work. And it's like pulling back that veil and speaking to, representatives and showing them how hard it is to maintain a career like this, and how much work and effort it takes to sustain a show, and to sustain, an act in a performance in a career. I mean, it's a big deal for folks that have been around for a very long time. That takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And like you're saying, there's a lot that people can learn from us, and they are learning from us, and they have learned so much. And so I think whenever people say something and they see it, I want them to identify that as circus. Like, hey, like, don't call that something else. Even saying Cirque du Soleil, I have to remind people in meetings sometimes. I'm like, Cirque means circus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same word. And because
Yep.
they, even start, saying that it's not circus, and it's like, no, it absolutely is. And that's, it's I think it's a very important thing to keep that, essence of true circus alive. And even though other environments are kind of even trying to pivot away from using the word circus, I think it's important that we continue to incorporate it, into how we're represented too. I think it's a very precious term, and it's a form, I think, of respect too. And
Yeah.
that's why I, have the Circuspreneur podcast too. And I wanted to make sure that circus was in, in my podcast name too. So yeah, that was great. It wasn't initially in it, but I came back to the circus.
Right on. Well, it's funny how you hear people they use the term wrong. You'll hear people go, "Oh man, this is like it's like a circus out here." They're using it in a negative way, and you just those who were there are like, "You have no idea how
uh,
what it takes to run a circus and how well put together things." Man, you have no
The
idea.
well-organized
Like
machine.
you are far from. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you are so like ill informed. And
oh
we
yeah.
even had a conversation like that at the White House during the roundtable. One of the, circus representatives literally said that. And when we were discussing that with the White House too, we were discussing, how George Washington loved the circus, and how he loved it so much he kept buying tickets, he invited the circus to the White House, and that we are so much more than just like the brunt of everybody's jokes, in this day and age. It's like, we are not uncoordinated and unqualified and, crazy. We're super strategic. We all communicate super well. Like, you can make something out of literally nothing. We're a family almost instantly wherever we
Oh yeah.
Oh
go.
yeah.
Those are lifelong connections and friends. And, I mean, like, circus people are some of the most resourceful people I've ever met. And I think that I know, and we can figure out, pretty much anything while also balancing things, and, walking on our hands. I mean, it's just wild. I think I sometimes say that like once a week, um when I'm in, like, legislative meetings, and you should see them. Sometimes they get a little bit bashful, like, oh, I'm sorry if I say that, or if I've said that, which again, it's like, yeah, it's just I think it's controlling our narrative, and I've seen a lot of people out there trying to make sure that people respect the name and what we do. But yeah, they can't have it, and that's what I think we need to continue to do is take back our art form and take back how how circus is discussed, and that's a big push again. This podcast is doing that where people can hear folks like us that are from the circus world and have lived in it, for the better part of our entire lives, and that we're just like human, like everyone else, and that, we have, we're business minded, like we understand a lot of different facets of how an industry works, just like anybody else. So I think it's really important to make us human because I think so many times we can sound or seem very unhuman where people just don't give credit to the fact that we have jobs and careers and we have responsibilities just like anybody else does. Ours just look a little bit different because we're bouncing around maybe on a train or, you know, performing in a tent or
Uh,
living in a tiny cubicle, but the issues and things are very similar. So I love that. I love that there's so many more circus conversations out here now, and I know that it's shifting that paradigm in how we're viewed and taken as seriously as we all take ourselves, because you have to be very serious to be in this industry or else you'll get hurt or you won't survive.
yep. Well, that leads me into my next question,
Mhm.
actually. So you know so much about circus history. Where do you see the circuses came from to where it's going? What is your personal opinion on that?
Ooh, well, I won't say that I know so much circus history. Like I feel like I do, but I also wanna, I don't wanna overspeak. I love circus, and I've been lucky. I've been around so many folks that have been in circus for years and years and years before me, and I've learned so much through listening to their stories, and I'm grateful for that. And I think that also speaks to like how intergenerational circus is, and the importance of that, and that has definitely informed my career, and I think it's always made me smarter being around circus generations and actually listening to them and listening to what they have to say and using those experiences to tread either lighter or to tread smarter, in this industry, because this industry is a lot. Um, and in where we have come from, and I've had discussions like this with other, with other circus folks, like the corporatization of circus. Some may say is gone too far, and then others that were in circus decades before me are like, but it's also a great thing. It's a great thing for circus to be a little bit more corporatized. It's given us more access in different ways and made things a bit more stable in terms of having a career. And giving folks more benefits that they can have so that they can do more for the circus, so that they can leverage their circus shows better, so that they can support their artists better, so that circus doesn't always have to come down to being a struggle, which sometimes it can be in the past. But I also think, again, it can come down to the different roadblocks in society that can be created for an industry where you have to go against the grain so much, or you have to do things that, again, aren't accounted for, and how tricky that can get. No matter how savvy or professional you are, you can still be like locked out of things. So I think the modernity of circus is great. I mean, it gave me my career. It's given so many people, I think, years longer into their careers too. Which has been, I think, a very big gift to circus, and I see circus going. In so many different dynamic directions. I mean, people are now trying to get circus in the Olympics. They're using a
Oh,
different
wow.
name, but yeah, you see pole sport,
Yep.
which came from circus, is on its way to becoming Olympic sport.
Mhm.
Juggling is now trying to become an
Oh,
Olympic
yeah. Oh,
sport.
man. Wow.
Yeah, and aerial sport is aerial arts is now
Yeah.
trying to
Wow.
also to become an Olympic sport. And again, everybody has a lot of different opinions. about this. So it's not me saying what is better or what is worse, but I mean the evolution of circus is fascinating at this point, where we are getting into so many different avenues and environments that we weren't previously in. And then let's see, if that's a positive step for our industry. Again, the way that circus, I think, is in so many different environments is a really powerful and special thing. I think the accessibility of circus is so great now. Before it was a little bit more elusive. Like, how do you get ushered into this environment? Like, are you from a generational circus family? No. It's
Yeah.
like, okay. And I think that we opened up a really big portal when it wasn't exclusive to you have to have a cousin. Like, if your family doesn't own a circus, no one's going to give you that level of
Right.
technique. No one's going to give you that level of perspective. And you'll never know those stories that you maybe need to know. You'll never be able to meet those people. How do you get ushered into a circus festival now? Like, anybody can get into a circus festival. I mean, almost anybody can go and compete in Monte Carlo. And I'm saying that kind of glibly. It's not just anybody. But, again, prior to that, I think that more of those doors were closed. To the more average individual, that maybe would not have dreamt to get on that stage, or been able to, get themselves into these spaces. But I think the accessibility of it is really beautiful, and I think the longevity of the careers right now too is really great. Even though I always say too, I mean, I don't feel like careers were shorter before, from all of my experiences with folks that have been in circus for many more years than I have been. Some people see that as like, oh, circus careers are much longer, but I think maybe they're just better now. Like, it's easier. Maybe now it's easier in certain ways to be in the industry longer. But again, there's also some things that are not as easy. Some may say that because of the success of all of these bigger shows, that circus is being overtly used. In ways that it shouldn't be, and that maybe we should pull back on how much circus is used in certain spots. I've had a joke with people over the years where they've said, in a little while, circus is going to be like in every gas station. Like,
Right.
like kind of like over consumed, the overconsumption of circus. And so I think also too, looking into and that brings me back to like the protections around our industry, where it's like, who gets the opportunity to use circus, and making sure that circus is in the right hands. Because just because there's opportunity doesn't mean like we need to expand into it necessarily. And I think that it speaks back to us making sure that we're a part of that conversation. And that, I've seen circus go into a lot of environments where the people don't know a lot about the medium, and how that can be dangerous, and how that can be exploitive, or it can just create not the best experience or environment for people that are like super professional, and they're super qualified. I think right now too, we're seeing that because it is also too a lot easier for people to get into circus and become artists, that there's 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 kind of like a gap between certain levels of professionalism, in a way that I think that we also too need to like be careful of, where people that used to go into certain positions had a lot more experience going into certain circus positions, but now they're coming into it with way less experience. And it doesn't make them bad, it just means that, they'll ask for so much less, in terms of doing their circus job. And it just comes back to like how demanding and how hard our job is. I mean, even, having like Ringling College, and like, schools that were so brilliantly informed and had people with such an incredible pedigree.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that we need to make sure that we still harness that and hold on to that, so that, it doesn't gets too liquidated, to the fact that people don't feel like they are getting the same leg up. And I hear that sometimes, where people are saying, I don't know if I'm getting that level of care, or of artistry, or of coaching, or of mentoring. Like, is it the same? And I think that it's an important thing to look at, definitely for our industry, in terms of like safety and integrity, of the art form, while also to making it beautifully accessible, for folks that feel like it is more realistic for them to imagine that they could place well at a at a very high standing circus festival, and that politics won't keep them out of that at all. So yeah, that's how I feel about that somewhat.
Right on. Um, I was going to ask you, what is the major difference between uh, doing a circus tour and when you did a competing tour with your gymnastics and all
Well, I think fun.
that?
I think that's probably the bigger. It would have to be fun. Like the competition tour wasn't fun, the circus tour was.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm guessing the
Like,
competitive tour, you're probably training a lot. And
yeah, training a lot, not seeing a lot, not experiencing your life. I mean, I think, competition is amazing and I loved competing. I'm someone who really believes in competition. Um, Even though it's funny because like I don't do a lot of circus festivals and people always have asked why, and that's the reason. I'm like, whoo, I think I competed enough for one lifetime. But I love competition. I do love it. But yeah, I would say like, going on a circus tour, when you're in any country or in any space and you get to really live there, you get to really see the people and make friends and have real experiences. And I never got to do that when I was competing, really. I mean, I've been all over the world competing from when I was like, like 8 years old. But then going into circus and actually having like a life, I think was just the biggest shift and very special. And, again, it speaks to when you're in circus, obviously, for some people this is true, but not for everyone. But for me, it was definitely true that I wasn't doing things that were as demanding, even though they were still very high level. And I think that that's the beauty of it too. You get to put that fun and that artistry inside of it, where, again, it's not in every single moment elite level competition. And the distinction is okay, but there are some people who are still doing elite level competition even in circus. And I
yeah.
feel for them. That's not me. That's not me. That's not what I wanted to be, even though I always wanted to try to maintain as high of like a standard as I could. But to me, that's not what makes circus either. I mean, some of my favorite acts that I've ever seen are not necessarily the most elite level acrobatics. It's so much more than that, and it's so much deeper than that too. So I think that that's probably the biggest distinction between competition and making more money.
There you go.
Yeah, the money helps doing
Yeah. Oh,
circus
yeah.
versus competing where you don't really make any money, being a competitive acrobat. That's also changed a lot now, which is great. People can get more sponsorships and they can do both. They can compete and gain sponsorships, but when I was competing, and again, things that we fought, for to happen in sport, are happening now. So that's cool and that's great. But yeah, I definitely, being on a circus tour and just, the different experiences that you have and the people that you come into contact with, just I think some of like the raddest individuals. And then when you're on any circus tour and then going into all sorts of other circus environments that you do is also just like very, very special. And I think I don't tour as much now, and that's one of the things that I miss about touring
Oh,
and
yeah.
being much more in the circus world, because you wouldn't just be in your show, you'd be in every other show at the same time
Yeah.
because people are coming to see you perform. You're going on your days off to go see other people perform, or you're going in the afternoon, depending on what your schedule is, or you're going at night if you're performing during the day. And so you're just like traveling and having so much more circus like interaction when you're touring and you're in so many different parts of the world. And I just think that people would be floored to see the different spaces where circus exists because there's just so many unique environments and cities
Yeah.
and villages. I know we've just been to every single village in town where there's like no one for days and they're like there's a whole show there. And that is just like absolutely special. Like, who else would be going to that space other than to go and see the circus? So I just,
Yeah.
going to like the like all the corners of the world here, and people will say something like when I'm traveling, and I'm like, oh, I've been there. Like, did you know that there was a, a circus show? Like, no,
Yeah.
like no lie. And people would just be blown away. They're like, wow, like there was a circus show there. I'm like, yeah, I was there for a while. It was, amazing, and had all the
Yeah.
things. So yeah, I
It-
definitely miss that, being more like stateside, because I'm more based in Vegas now. So
It's hard to explain
Okay.
uh, the bond that you have with people. Uh, I was talking to B earlier. I was telling him before we got on, like last night I had a nightmare that I got fired from the circus. Yeah, it was weird. We hadn't been a part of the circus for years. And I woke up, and it even after I woke up took me a minute to realize, wait, I haven't been with this. What's going on here? So
you know
it
what?
sticks with you.
One of my biggest nightmares is not making it to the show. Like,
Oh
that
man,
is
oh yeah,
like the biggest nightmare. That is like my recurring nightmare of like we missed the show, like we didn't get
oh
there,
yeah,
or we
that'd be
didn't bring our
horrible. Oh,
costumes or something. Like, oh my God,
Or
that is
missed
like
start time.
my brain, my consciousness is like defaulted. Like, you're supposed to, you're on right now. No, it's you. What?
whoops.
Oh well. Like,
Well,
whoopsie. Oh yeah.
you have something, B?
Yeah. Have you been on circus trains, correct?
I have been on circus trains a little bit, but I have not been on a full circus train tour. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, what
No,
was your favorite circus
not
train
not
run?
yet. Yeah, I know. I know. I'm one of those. It's like I'm a near miss. I almost was there, like multiple times, and yeah, never really got the full experience in that way. But maybe.
Well, what was your favorite place to perform?
Oh gosh. Oof. Wow. I would say that I think Germany is just
Nice.
is so special in terms of how Germany loves circus. I mean, the level of respect and the level of joy and the level of standing ovations that you will get from a German audience till this day is, I think, almost unmatched anywhere else. In the world. I mean, how many surabes you're gonna get, and people just like, one more time, come, like, just how many curtain calls you're gonna do. It's very special, and um, yeah, that I think that's been one of my favorite places to be. Again, there's so many, it's so hard to choose because I love so many places I've performed in and visited over the years for just different reasons. But that like that old feeling, that old quality of the circus that you feel, you feel that in Germany every time you're there. You step into a Spiegel tent there, and I don't know, it's like being in a different time. I instantly feel
Transported.
like transported. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, transported. Like, even every time I go, and I've worked there so many times over the years, but every time I step into a new contract in Germany, I always am a little bit like um I don't know what it is, like not stable or something. Like, it's like it's overwhelming sometimes in that way, because I feel that rush of like, like the age of the theater, or the age of just like where we're at, and the people, there that are working the shows still, and there's some characters there. So
Right. And
there's a
I'm sure
character.
there's a big different feel between a venue and a tent too. The feel you get,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. and I'm happy to have, performed in all those spaces, the traveling tents and the standalone arenas and theaters and all those big spaces, newer spaces, older spaces. I mean, it definitely just informs how you feel and what type of performance you're going to have. And yeah, I hope that people have a lot of different experiences in the circus like I've had in that way, because having that experience of going into so many different venues is hard. It is not easy, performing in so many different spaces. But it's definitely, created the performer that you see now, and being able to exist in so many different spaces where, it doesn't matter what's happening, like the show is happening.
Is there a big
Yeah.
difference between, say, a tent and a stage on your performance, on what you mentally planned?
Yes and no. Yeah, yeah, there is. I mean, sometimes, the tent, it depends on like the weather, for example,
Well,
if
yeah.
we're going to be probably at the behest of the elements when you're in a tent. And so, it might be way hotter for a while. You might get sweatier, being a solo hand balancer or being a hand to hand actor, having all of that contact, or it might be really cold. I mean, I've walked through the snow to get to the stage in a tent,
Oof.
like literally in costume in
Wow.
the snow in heels, and then in 2 seconds, you're on stage, like,
You
oh
didn't you
my
didn't
god,
go you didn't go 5 miles uphill each way, did
and
you?
telling you, like, they're, like, wiping off the prop, like, I've had them, like, wiping, like, water, snow, things, like, off the prop and then, like, placing it, like, on stage. I've had, so yeah, it definitely, if I'm in a controlled environment, for sure, as soon as you're in an environment where you know that, nothing's gonna cave in, it's not gonna rain inside on the stage, which everyone knows what that's like. You're like
Mhm.
mid-act and suddenly
Oh, yeah.
it's just raining. Oh my God. I was performing in Boston one year, and we were doing live TV. And it was a live segment. And as soon as they pushed me out there to start my act, it started snowing. And there was no
Oh,
cover, and
Oh,
there
no.
was no way to stop. It was live, live, live. And it just snowed the entire time. And I was just like shivering. I mean,
Oh,
good thing I was, in a different costume. I was in like a onesie because it was like Boston during the winter, but they didn't project snow. So they thought they were just like in the clear. It was still kind of early on, but it was so freezing. And it was like billowing. It wasn't like a light, soft snow. It like turned into like a full like storm. And like I've been in tents where it's like the tent is gonna fly away. Like we're trying to do the show, and they're like, we don't know if the next act can go on because the tent is just gonna fly away.
wow.
oh,
Like
wow.
Show
on that
must go
level.
on.
I mean, the show must go on at any time. So, a controlled environment, I would say, is a treat. Like, at a certain point, you're like, this is awesome. It's going to be the same every day. It's great. I don't have to change anything.
Well, we are getting to that point in the show. We are coming down on time. Before we go, I'm gonna do something a little different. Do you have any questions for us?
Oh my God. I have so many questions for you. I mean, this is great. Thank you so much for, having me on Off the Rail, because since
Oh
I
yeah,
am a
thanks for
podcaster
being here.
myself, yeah, of course, it's a pleasure. I am usually the one interviewing. So I actually, I don't speak about myself that much, these last like 5 years doing the podcast. So it's really special. I almost forget like, even any of my experiences because I'm so focused on making sure that I have the experiences of the guest. But I'm just going to shoot some questions back to both of you. What was your favorite show and circus experience, or do you have even a show that you did that is like prolific for you that you'll just like never forget what happened in that show?
So
Want to go
I
first, B?
was part of Ringling during 2015, 16, and 17. And I was in Car. So
Oh,
My talent was to cook for about 355 people in the matter of 25 minutes because everyone between shows had to grab food. And so it's for me, from what I've learned about the circus shows and history and everything else, like doing this podcast. Um, so I don't know the show's names, but for me, I really love watching Lou Jacobs perform and Frosty Little. So those are some of my
I love
favorite
that.
performers. I would say currently, I'd have to come back on that one because there's a lot of great.
We've still
So
There,
got
there's
time.
like Circus Vartes. They have a great cast right now. So I mean, there's a lot out there. Are
It's hard to choose
well,
because there's so much circus now. I'm like, oh
there's
my God, like
42 because
the
Big
shows,
Apple
the
just
amount of
opened.
shows.
There's 42 touring in America right now.
Yeah. Wow, 42. Thank you for that number. I'm going to use that as the statistic. I'm not sure if we if we have that number. I'm
so,
going to bring that
We
up my
got it
next meeting.
confirmed through
Thank
Father
you.
for,
Frank because he's in charge of knowing that.
so for me, I started a nice way to put this is when I started, I was waste disposal, if you will. I wasn't
Oh,
officially circus, but yes. So the show that I started that on was actually Dragons on the Blue Unit. So that will always be memorable for me because that's how I got introduced. And then a year later, through meeting awesome people, they actually got me to apply with Ringling, and then I ended up on the Red Unit. And I'm not sure if that was Built to Maze or Circus Extreme that I came on, but for me, I was a handyman, so I fix things in your room. So for me, it was more the experiences with the people I met, like B, um, and just going out in the different towns and experiencing like New York City and walking across the in San Francisco the Golden Gate Bridge and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's my thing. But with that
You know,
said,
I was I was speaking to a representative's office. Can't remember what their off which whose office this was, but this person, we were speaking about policy for circus, and their uncle, I believe, was one of the handymen for Ringling
ah,
for many years. Yeah, and
nice.
they didn't say it for the whole meeting.
Oh,
And then at the very end, they were like, "Well, I have a unique connection to the circus." And I was like, "Wow, really? Do tell. Who, what, when, where?" And they were like, "My uncle toured with the circus for decades." And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And I'm kind of kicking myself right now for not remembering his name. But yeah, it was really special. They brought that around in a really unique way after they let me go
right on.
on and on and on and on.
So, with that said, can you tell us a couple other things out of the way real quick? Can you tell people where they can find more information on the Circus Arts Guild of America and how they can help?
Yes, thank you so much for
Hmm.
that. You can follow me at Shenea Stiletto on Instagram and at the Circuspreneur podcast and at circuspreneur.com. And that is where we release all of the efforts of the Circus Arts Guild of America. We are consistently putting out calls to action and hosting dialogue and doing outreach to the industry and to the community. So follow us there, and you'll learn about all the things that we're doing and how you can be involved and participate, because we're always looking for everyone from every different facet and position in the circus to participate in these conversations, because that's what we believe it should be like.
Right on. And can you tell everybody how they can get on or where they can find the Circuspreneur podcast?
Oh, thank you again for my little
Yeah.
plug.
Hey, no
All links will
problem.
be
Hey,
down
just
below.
remember to like, share, and subscribe. Yep.
That's awesome. You can find the Circuspreneur podcast on all podcasting platforms, on YouTube, at the Shenea Stiletto page. You can also just type in Circuspreneur podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, on Google Podcast, and on iHeart Podcast as well. And we are also sponsored by stagelink.com. And so you can find us on stagelink.com, hosted by Shenea Stiletto.
Right on. You heard it there, folks. I'd like to thank our listeners and watchers, people viewing at home for joining in. And once again, thank you for being our guest. And with that said, until next time, folks, we'll see you down the road.
Thank you so much.